Great. Well, good to see you again, Nicholas. So here we are again for another video talking about one of the topics from our book, Crypto Assets in Trusts and Foundations. And I think today we're going to cover a really very important topic about custody, aren't we?
Yeah, good to see you again, Ross, and thank you for organizing this series. Custody definitely is a super important topic, and it's possibly also the reason why crypto has not made major advances in the world of trusts and foundations. Yeah, because simply said, the trustees and the boards of directors of foundations, they are a bit afraid how to hold crypto. They don't understand how that works. So custody is definitely a very central topic if we sort of look at the reasons why we are not having so many cases of wealth management structures holding crypto.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things with my brain is my brain always thinks everything's easy and can be simplified, right? Which just generally serves me well. Sometimes it gets me in trouble though, but and my brain on this topic looked at it, well, it's not that complicated actually. It's no different to a trustee with cash. So they wouldn't put cash in their drawer in the office, right? And similarly, you wouldn't put crypto just on a ledger and leave it in a drawer in the office, right? So
Yeah, you're right.
right,
Mhm.
and in fact, the solutions are the same. So of course, with cash, you'd go along to a reputable bank and you'd
Mhm.
place the money there, and that's fine. And I think perhaps one of the issues here is that, and we're going to come on to the solution is the same. You need to use a professional custodian, and they can largely de-risk you entirely. But of course, as this is a new world, it's quite hard for trustees to know who's a reputable institution. I mean, a lot of them are reputable one minute and then they're gone the next in crypto. And and so how do you monitor that? And also perhaps, if you put trust money into JP Morgan and they lose it, you're not going to get criticized by a court for that.
Not,
Is it the same if you are to use a professional crypto custodian and something goes wrong? Does that protect you? So yeah, that's what I'd love to get to talk to you about. If you agree that that is the solution, if there's other recommendations, is it okay for trustees to
no,
use a ledger? I know the regulations around this are quite interesting, and yeah. So where should we go from there?
yeah. No, I think you put it exactly right. We can make things easy, and maybe the crypto people were at the fault because they loved explaining things about private keys and addresses and how you can self-custody and ledger devices and so on. And then these poor trustees and boards and board members, they thought, oh my God, this is so geeky and complicated. This is not something for us. While the solution obviously is, as you said, to entrust these crypto assets to somebody else. And in a certain sense, uh, crypto people always preach this not your keys, not your crypto.
Mhm.
But that is only true for the true nerds holding their own money. It's not true for the professional person managing, administering somebody else's money. And especially if it's, I mean, if you're holding small amounts, that's fine. But if these are large amounts of somebody else's money and you're responsible for that, it just gets too messy and too
Mm.
complicated. And the simple solution is obviously to outsource that. And the problem only is that, I mean, it came back with Sam Bankman-Fried, a very reputable person up to a certain point until he was not anymore a reputable person. And so there's a bit of a development. So coming from this, not your keys, not your crypto, everybody must self-custody. Then we're saying, no, no, this doesn't apply to people administering funds that belong to somebody else. And then we had these cases, spectacular blow-ups of reputable persons. And yeah, so where are we
Well, actually,
now?
that's a very good point, isn't it? Because we're not saying put your money on a custody on a trading platform. So people might think, oh, when you say custodian, you mean Coinbase, you meant FTX, you meant Binance. No, no, we're not saying leave your money
No.
on the trading platform. Actually, in fact, that's or sorry, a centralized platform.
Hmm.
That's actually almost even worse, actually. Although I think, and correct me if you don't agree with this, Nicholas, but I think what happened, the part of the problem with FTX is that running up to the years up to FTX collapse, a lot of people had got comfortable with the centralized exchanges that they'd
Hmm.
put into reputable businesses, they're well capitalized, well run, and so people just was just leaving their money on there. Where
Hmm.
in the times before they would, you do transaction and get it off quickly because the infrastructure was not good. So we're not saying that, are we? We're saying we'll come onto it using a proper custodian that's offline. It's protected.
Yeah, I think it's important. So it's easy, but it's not that easy. Yeah? You
Mm.
still have to do your work. You have to do due diligence. Who are the players on this market? Which of those have a long track record? They have been in business for many years. You're not just actually leaving your money on an exchange, but you are giving your crypto assets to a custodian under a specific agreement. This agreement will have to be reviewed. The agreement must provide for insurance. So if something bad happens, then there's a claim against an insurance company for the crypto assets. The custodian must have organizational measures in place. So there must be a certain system who can access these crypto assets and a certain procedure how they can be accessed. There must be technical measures in place, so technical safeguards, technical solutions. There's super complicated things that actually help these custodians to keep custody of their assets. But I think for the poor trustee who has to deal with this topic, everything boils down to the due diligence and sort of taking care of vetting these providers whether they're really suitable for this task.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think for the trustee, I mean, obviously you should be doing this for any asset. So even with cash at UBS or JP Morgan, technically
Hmm.
you probably should be doing this as well, shouldn't you? You should be reviewing the capitalization of the bank, their policy and procedures, whether they got insurance. But of course, people don't. Uh, you just trust the brand name, these long established brand names, right? And I think it would be fair to say that a court would kind of have sympathy with that. But so I think what we're saying is with the crypto JP Morgan equivalents, you need
Hmm.
to do your job properly, basically. And I think one of the things we put in the book, wasn't it, that we recommend that you kind of form a intelligence committee or digital assets committee, that you have senior people on it, that you have IT people on it, but probably importantly, actually, we also said you should have the juniors on it because it's more likely than
Yeah,
nine.
that was good. Yeah.
It's the 19-year-old in the office that's going to know what's going on. You need to know well in advance if one of these things is about to blow up as well.
Mhm.
You need to know, and that's all happening over Twitter and things like that. So, you probably want the kid in the office who's religiously following the right Twitter accounts and things like that, isn't it? On a committee like that. And yeah, they need to do their job properly. Then they need to see the audit reports and read them and discuss them. And so it's a real commitment to doing the trustee job properly. Actually, it's almost not a commitment to be doing the crypto properly. It's you really need to do your trustee role more thoroughly with this type of asset.
Yeah, I mean this is an interesting development because we are seeing more and more of these professional custodians who are very corporate and very professional and very well organized. And it's somehow the antithesis of how crypto started, how Bitcoin started, which was like wild and anarcho style. Yeah, so this has become more mainstream. Obviously, there are many custodians in place, but if you if you have a very strict set of criteria, then you probably narrow down very quickly to just a handful of very large ones, which have great brand names. And I don't know whether we want to mention any, but there are some really great brands out there that have a lot to lose. Yeah, so these are these are not the FTXs of the world that just have the FTX business, or yeah, some other custodians that are only in crypto, but these have other branches, and they will be severely impacted if something went wrong with their crypto custody business. So they
Yeah,
will
and a
take.
lot of these ones, I mean, they were funded from day one to their goal was to handle institutional money, wasn't it? They were building businesses that a pension fund might one day trust. So that was more like their target market, right? They were aiming for trustees, so that their goal from day one was to build something that an institution, old school institution would be comfortable with, right? So I think we could say some names. I can't be like sort of Anchorage is one that springs to mind. You've got Copper as well as one of the big ones here in Switzerland, and
Fidelity, Fidelity, for example.
right, yeah. Well, I mean,
I mean, this,
one thing we can talk
yeah,
about as well, of course, is that increasingly you've basically got the banks now that
yeah.
JP Morgan have got their own sort of platform. Although a lot of them are actually white labeling these
Mhm.
crypto platforms actually, but they are assuming the risk. But this actually a whole thing might fall away shortly because the actual banks themselves have built their own custody platforms.
Yeah, this will certainly there will certainly be a development in that respect with banks opening their own, and they're basically doing the same thing that they have been doing for hundreds of years, holding other people's assets in a secure manner, very trustworthy, and taking care that there are no bank robbers coming into the bank and heading off with their customers' funds. And the same thing is in crypto. The equivalent of a bank robbery would be somebody breaking in, not physically, but just via the internet and stealing the private keys of the bank where the crypto assets of customers are stored.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's maybe talk a little bit about the settlors actually, because we'll come back to the trustees, but let's talk and their concern, and we can dive deeper into how the custodians do protect the asset. But it's interesting just to talk about settlors. So, as you said, the sort of the nature of the crypto settlors changing a little bit, right? In the past, it was the degen, as you say, that it was this anarchist movement that came out of the 2008 financial crisis. And I mean, really, the bloody crypto bros, they
Yeah.
they killed themselves off, didn't they? With just real utter incompetence in the end. Um, so the adults have kind of stepped in, which is good in one thing, as maybe made the whole thing a little bit more boring. But um, my view was that settlors always wanted to have control still over those assets, and
Mhm.
that might also just be that they know the trustees not up to it, right? The trustees more than capable of legally holding these assets, but
Mhm.
not interacting with these assets very comfortably, right? So there's that control issue, and then I think also what I've seen, they're very scared that if they put their crypto into a custodian, and that custodian might be lending against it to other people, or doing what FTX did, right? Basically taking the crypto and trading it
Yeah.
on their own account, right? So those seem to be the two
Gambling.
things that settlers worry about is, how do I retain some sort of control over this? And if, for example, what we say is, well, you could have a multi-sig wallet, maybe it's
Mhm.
free trustee people, and then the settler at the end, or something like that, right? So not that, and I think you could phrase that it's not. And I think what I would say if I was up in front of a judge on that was, well, it's not control. It's just that it's a very, very high risk asset, and the settler is there just to sort of okay it as a security measure, not as an element of control, right? So I think that can
Mhm.
be baked in quite easily. And I think also that there are a lot of these custodians who are literally they're not a bank, right? They're just a custodian. They're not doing anything with the money. But what's your views on that? What do you see settlers worrying about?
Yeah, I agree. For settlers, especially those that are very sort of deep into crypto, they might have this fear that their crypto assets will not stay on this address, but will be on land or will be used for gambling or whatever other purpose, and then something bad will happen. I mean, possibly it's a question of the laws of the jurisdiction of the settlor of the trust, whether such a multi-key, sorry, a multi-sig setup would actually be seen as a real transfer. Yeah. So, for example, in Austria, we don't have any trust. We have foundations, and you really have to sort of transfer the asset. And if you retain control, this might be a topic for debate. But
Do you think
I
even
mean,
being one authority on a payment system might devalue that?
yeah,
Mm.
it's like, yeah, maybe, I mean, what definitely could be done is, I mean, give the founder of this foundation or the settlor of this trust the address, and then the founder settlor can periodically check whether the assets are still on that address or whether they have been moved. If they've been moved, there must be some reason for that, yeah,
Mm.
and then at least you can see what's happening. Yeah,
Mm.
but again, yeah, you need proper documentation, and there need to be rules that say that the trustee or the foundation may not hypothecate, may not sort of lend, may not borrow against these assets, or may
Mm.
not use those for other purposes. So there is a role for lawyers and a role for legal advice in that respect. It's necessary to have good agreements, so agreements between the structure and between the trustee and the custodian, but also in the foundational documents of the trust or the foundation saying what is to happen with these assets. They are there for the long term. They may not be exchanged against other crypto assets. They may not be pledged. They may not be used for whatever. Maybe not even staked. Yeah, if that's or staked in some strange DeFi protocols. So different settlers or founders might have different views what is permissible and what not. What type of yield are you allowed to generate, and what type of yield should you sort of stay away from?
Yeah, so that's right, isn't it? There's a lot that can be baked in and tailored into the documents themselves. I mean, there
Mm,
is a difficult balance, isn't there, between getting the legal risks on top of the legal risks, but then you might open the door to a trustee running off with the money or something, right? So you're trying to balance kind of not the hacking or fraudulent risk and the
mm,
legal one, right? And it's quite a difficult one to get because obviously the more oversight you might have, then that means the legal risk of this being seen not in the way you want it increases, right?
mm,
So it's difficult to balance, and sometimes that's quite personal, isn't it? Depends on what the settler's really worrying about, right? They might not worry about that, and they're just completely
mm,
terrified of the legal risks, and they're not worried about the fraud one at all. But however, it's the other way around, they're less worried about the legal and they're worried
mm.
about the fraud. So yeah, you got to sort of tailor it with the individual set law. But as you said, a lot of this you can bake into the actual trust documents or foundation documents.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I wonder how things will develop with increasing regulation. So if you think about MiCA in the European Union, which will, if you come back again to the custodians, which will very in a very fine-grained manner impose all sorts of obligations on custodians. That will definitely lead to a more
Mm.
professionalization because and I think in crypto, people are often against regulation, but this is an area where regulation really makes sense. It's like a bank, and basically these custodians are banks. They are holding other people's funds, and of course we have to do vetting and look into the agreements and maybe mark them up and make them a bit more watertight and see where there's insurance and everything. But there's also the necessity for the state to look into these providers and to have audits and check whether they comply with all the requirements. So I think the future is bright for trustees or boards of foundations who want to outsource this holding of crypto assets to custodians because this can only become better. There's just going to be more oversight and I think I think this is good for our industry. What do you think? Did you think these rules are maybe negative, or are they only positive? What are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of veer on people should be left alone to do what they want, a bit of a libertarian myself, but
Hmm.
there perhaps when you're talking about custody of other people's money, if that is the service you're offering, it's such an important thing, right? I think like with money, or when you're a store of value, it's people's energy from past effort, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
That's that right. That's
Well,
the kind of, so when money goes missing, it's energy that is being stolen from you, right? I think that's one of the reasons.
part of you. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
that's
And that you were going to exchange in the future for something else. And so, it's a really terrible thing when something like this happens. So, yeah, no, I think it probably in that area, as you say, it's justified. And, even if it just means there's like a certain small sector that's well regulated, that people, if they want the well regulated, they can go to, it's there, right? And if
Mhm.
they want to use something that's less regulated, then that's at their risk, right? But there is if people are holding themselves out as gold standard, then the regulations are asking them to attain those standards and improve it, right? So I agree. It was interesting you mentioned about the regulations, because um, the VASP laws, virtual asset service provider laws, that have sort of popped up in most of the offshore jurisdictions, a lot of them, and this really came out when we wrote the book. A lot of them seem to have been poorly drafted, in that it would appear that if you were a trustee and you're holding the assets directly on chain, and maybe you've got a ledger approval in the office or something like that, technically that means you're a custodian and you
Mm.
should have a custody
Yeah.
license, wasn't it? Right. And I'm pretty sure that's not the spirit of the law, right? The law is talking about somebody who's setting up a business as a custodian, but it did look that you could be captured. So I think you have to probably use a professional custodian, not just to be prudent, but actually potentially to stay outside of the custody regulations yourself.
Yeah, if I may pick up, I totally agree with your point of view about sort of government should not unnecessarily interfere with private citizens' lives, and should only interfere to the extent that it's necessary to keep dangers away. And this is a danger that there will be sloppy custodians, people who are outright malicious, and I think it's good to have that. Obviously, the MiCA rules are extremely extensive, and this is just the first level. There will be additional sort of rules, and it will become more and more complicated, as is usual in the European Union. So maybe at some point it might have a suffocating effect. Yeah?
Mm.
But I don't think we're at that point. Yeah? And I also, another thing is the level playing field. Yeah? So if there are very strict rules for banks, then obviously banks will say, why are there rules which are less strict,
Mm.
which apply to the same type of business, namely holding people's wealth uh, in a different form, namely in crypto instead of banknotes or legal tender.
Yeah, that's a good
So
point, isn't it?
this
Yeah,
this
that's a good point. I mean, I imagine that a lot of these independent crypto custodians, if they're successful, they'll get bought by banks, won't they? And probably it's all going to end up in the banks at the end of the day anyway, right? Yeah. Okay, so
yeah.
what other things were we going to talk about? So we've uh yeah, maybe digging a little bit deeper onto kind of how the what you should look out for at the custodian. So we've spoken about multi-sig wallets. So I mean, I think the point there is that with a lot of these professional custodians, you can replicate the trustee signatory list. Most trustees
Mhm.
have A, B signatories, and you might need two A's and one B for certain transaction limits, or two B's if it's a smaller amount, and things like that. You can replicate that at the crypto custodian normally. So people will have a sign on. A lot of them are quite sophisticated, so they you might even use your mobile phone. It might have to scan your eyes. before it will let you approve it. I've even heard some of them, they've got AI in there. They can tell whether you're being held hostage or something and under duress.
Yeah. I'm really
Yeah.
glad you're
I don't know, your
here.
nose is moving in a certain way or something that it means you, yeah.
The
So
first impression.
yeah,
Yeah.
or so you're in, they've got so there's a lot of like security things, and perhaps one of the main things is where we talk about HSM type of setups,
Mhm.
right? Where really the actual the custody is kind of disconnected from the internet. So it'll only connect to the internet when it needs to do a transaction, then it disconnects, and it will hide the private keys and things like that. So they're generally offline, cold storage, but they can probably still trade within 15 minutes or something like that. So what other things would you say as well that are important that you need to look at the custodian itself?
Yeah, I mean, what is the typical expectation of these crypto settlors or founders? I mean, I think that the goal is they will have a certain part of the crypto assets that they want to hold, that they want somebody else to hold and to administer, and this is for the long term. This might be Bitcoin, sizable amount of Bitcoins, and they're just going to be held and not going to be traded, and it's going to just stay in there. Yeah. And then they have their own portfolio, and they are like day trading and buying and selling and doing all sorts of degenerate DeFi stuff. So I think the necessity for a crypto trustee holding crypto, for a foundation holding crypto, to very quickly be able to do something, this is probably less relevant. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
And I don't know whether you have seen cases where the settlor basically calls up the trustee every other day and says, do this, do that, and so on. I think that would be a bit against this idea of having a structure in place for the long term and for holding an asset for a certain purpose. If somebody wants to trade, I think a trustee should tell a client, a crypto client, this is a structure that it's a bit more complicated if you want to deal on a daily basis and do certain things. And it's also not I think the idea of a trust or of a foundation, that there's sort of a real business going on, and interactions happen regularly.
Mm.
So I think
Which, by the way, it is the same for normal assets.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We have
I
this
think
we
you
have this conversation with sellers, say, hey, look, if you want to do day trading on your bonds and equity, do it in your
okay.
own, not on the trust,
Yeah.
because the other thing is that because trustees have to have a lot of procedures and
Mhm.
workflows to make sure that if a payment's done, that it's in line with the trust deed to the correct beneficiary, it's been thought about, the paperwork's been put in place, the legal agreements are checked, right? So their workflows to protect the trust are quite cumbersome. So that's just for normal assets. So it's no different with crypto.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of it's for these workflows and these procedures. They actually are for the benefit of the client, yeah, and the client wants to be protected. So that's why these procedures have been instituted. And now, if somebody wants to day trade, then it actually a disadvantage. It becomes really expensive and really cumbersome. It cannot be done immediately. There's a bit of time involved. Yeah, so I think the necessity to be able to access the crypto assets very very rapidly, this is not really a real necessity. I think it's important that these crypto assets are stored, and can be accessible in the day that at the day that they need to be accessed, but in between, I don't think this is such a big topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing I think that this is a very simple solution actually is that you can set it up that transfers can only be made to whitelisted wallets. So
Hmm.
you basically no transfers can be made to a wallet that you haven't designated. So you could actually just designate the beneficiary, say, or one specific wallet. So I think that's a pretty hardcore way of locking down the assets that I would encourage, right? Only whitelisted wallets can be applied to. Maybe we've spoken about curated workflows. We've spoke about multi-factor authentication. We've spoken about the hardware security models that really restrict control to the cryptographic keys. EMP and cyber attack protection. EMP always comes up, doesn't it? Like, people, I don't know if you should really need to worry about an EMP attack because if the electricity's disappeared in a city, we're all done for anyway, right? But
Yeah,
most custodians do have extensive, obviously, cybersecurity and things like EMP protection. But that I think is something that you would want to see their documents around. You'd want to see
mhm.
their audit reports around that. You'd want to review them with some technical people. Maybe you've got a crypto advisor on. So
Mhm.
I think that's another part that trustees will need to look
Yeah.
at the custodian.
But is an EMP attack not in the same basket like what is it called? A zombie apocalypse or something like this. So very very unrealistic catastrophe.
Yeah,
And
it comes up a lot. So you read it a lot, but yeah, I mean, I remember somebody saying that, you'd probably rather die in a nuclear attack than survive an EMP attack, right? Because basically, we're knocked back to the Stone Ages in straight away, and it won't be much fun.
yeah. So yeah, who knows how relevant such provisions are? Yeah.
Yeah, certainly, but certainly, obviously, I mean, I mean, obviously, a lot of trustees worry about cybersecurity and hacking around these assets, which is true. It is prolific, right? I see that with all my clients. They have lots of problems
Mm.
with this industry. So the fact that you're outsourcing that risk to a professional that is their main job, right? But I'd encourage you to really interrogate them on their security processes
Yeah.
and procedures. Yeah.
Yeah, cybersecurity is a big topic, yeah. And I looked up recently the average bank robbery or the largest bank robberies to date. And I think so. Being a bank robber is not a very lucrative
Mm,
profession nowadays. You can only take off with a very limited amount of banknotes. And I think the largest bank robberies have been 80 or 100 million dollars.
mhm,
Whereas in crypto, as you're aware, there have been bank robberies, if you can call it that way, of hundreds of millions and even approaching the billion. So it is a totally different topic. But I think what happened are mostly sort of DeFi protocols, improperly coded smart contracts in essence, or exchanges which were unprofessional.
mm.
Uh, one man shows more or less, and then something really bad happened. But the professional custodians, um, I think they know about these topics and they have their professionals, their experts in this topic that know what has to be done so that you don't become victim of a North Korean cyber attack.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for most people, you're holding Bitcoin basically on trust, right? Maybe Ethereum, but you're not. I don't think you're going to be holding really other crypto coins, and you're
No.
holding them on cold storage at a professional. I mean, honestly, really, is there much risk around that? I think that's pretty low risk, and has the same risks as holding stock, Tesla shares at JP Morgan, to be honest with you. So I think if you're doing that, if you say, look, we'll hold Bitcoin long term, and we work with a professional custodian that we scrutinize and that, then and you tell your documents properly, I think this can generally be quite well managed and low risk to the trustee.
Yeah, this huge universe of thousands of crypto assets, I think only a very small, insignificant number is relevant for our topic. Yeah, most of these wealth management structures will, as you say, will be holding Bitcoin, maybe Ether or maybe some other top 10 or so crypto asset. But the farther down you go, the more speculative it is, and the more this is a crypto asset that the individual, that the customer, the client should be actually holding him or herself and be in a position to immediately sell when things
Yeah.
go.
I think trustees worry about that a lot as well, right? The volatile nature. I was having a conversation with someone in the Cayman Islands about this recently, and they, I think they sort of wanted in sort of almost instructions or detail in the trust deed on what levels they should sell at, or that they had a power of attorney to sell at a certain low or high place to sort of cap and tail the volatility. But um, yeah, I think if you're just holding the top 10 coins or something like that, or even just top three, that risk is quite limited, right? And as you say, you'd probably say, look, we don't hold anything outside the top five coins. It's too volatile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think those trustees or boards of foundations who are not so well informed about crypto, they're thinking of these like NFTs or meme coins or other crypto assets that are super volatile. Whereas Bitcoin or the top five that you just mentioned, over time the volatility is going down. Of course, you have larger ups and downs compared to stocks or bonds. But things are sort of getting less and less volatile, and this is, I think, not that concern. And especially if you're holding for the long term, then you should not really care as a settlor what happens when Bitcoin goes down by 5%. Who cares about that?
Yeah, exactly
If
right.
in 20 years is a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is, isn't it? Okay, and then maybe just wrapping up on some final thoughts. I mean, another thought is, of course, trustees really worry about AML and
Hmm.
if the coins have come from the right place or they're contaminated. And I
Hmm.
I would say, well, that's another thing that the custodian will help you. One of these
Yeah.
professional institutional custodians will help do all the AML checks as well. So that you, again, using a bit like a bank might, right? Again, using the bank might help you, but I suspect as your crypto custodians will be even more helpful than a traditional bank in helping you to sort of AML, KYC, the Settlor and the assets. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you would, when you sort of, when the client approaches you, you would anyway not take custody of the crypto assets and then send them over to the custodian. But the trust or the foundation would enter into this custody arrangement with the custodian, and then the custodian receives these crypto assets and carries out the AML checks. Yeah, so I think you can offload that to the very easily to the custodian, and this is less of a concern than for the trustee. So this is, yeah, I think you're right. They will definitely be a lot more helpful than a typical bank in in assisting you with that. And of course, due to the transparency of the blockchain, so much more is possible than is possible in the normal world. Right? It's so
Yeah,
easy.
that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one of the ironic points, isn't it? People say crypto is easier to launder than cash, but actually, it's quite traceable. It's quite hard. It's actually very difficult. Even if you, I mean, you read a lot of those big hacks. Quite often,
Hmm.
they're tracked down very quickly, or quite often they actually give the money back, even, don't they? Because it's very hard to take it into an anonymous zone and offload it and off ramp it and that. So you should be able to do a reasonable AML job. Like for example, as well, there's a lot of like sanctioned and blacklisted wallet lists now. There are professional compliance, crypto compliance firms like Chain Analysis that will
Hmm.
make sure that the crypto you're taking hasn't ever touched a sanctioned or a blacklisted wallet. So there and again, like with everything, you're not being asked to do a perfect job. Obviously, you're aiming to do a perfect job, but really, as long as you're attaining a level of best practice, and particularly
Hmm.
with new assets like this, it is just best practice. you're unlikely to be criticized for that, right? So there's enough professional firms that you can use to handle these assets that remove the stress and the workload off you, but I think remove the risk off you and make it that you can hold these assets.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, super. So I think we've touched quite a lot of
Yeah, I think that was all the main points there, wasn't it?
super, super. So let's continue our journey in the next few weeks.
Yep.
We're going to, I think next time we're going to start with we're going to another country and
Another
we're going to
country
go
next
through
time. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It
and
might be the Cayman Islands, I think we've got actually. So
yeah,
yeah.
super, super.
Excellent, Nicholas. Okay.
Good.
Great. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ross. Take care. Bye bye.